Okay, there we go. Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. Good to be back, to see friendly faces and camera lenses from all the major networks. It is one of the challenges I've had coming out of radiation is I need lots of water, so apologies to those who are asking why is he drinking so much. It's just water, and I need lots of it. So I'm very pleased and proud of the throne speech that was delivered today by Her Honor Lieutenant Governor, laying out not just the year ahead, but a reminder to all of us of the extraordinary challenges that all of us have held together over the past number of years. It is unprecedented. I think I've said that word. I think a word search of how many times, as the Premier said, unprecedented would bring back a very, very large number, but it does not change the fact that we've been able to be successful through COVID, through heat domes, through atmospheric rivers, through fires and floods, because British Columbians are extraordinary at coming together to help each other. And the examples that we saw last year, I'm confident will take us through this year if we come upon similar challenges. But I'm hopeful that the Year of the Tiger, 2022, will be a much better year and a more prosperous year for all of us, where we experience good health and our communities continue to grow and prosper. And with that, I'm sure there's a question or two, and we'll get right at it.
Thanks. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up. We will start with the phone and then come back to the room. First question today is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail. Justine, are you there? No. Okay, we're moving on to Rob Shaw, Check News.
Hey, Premier. I'm anticipating a response from the Liberals here, just based on reading your speech, that there's not much new in it. How would you respond to that criticism that there isn't a lot of new items listed in your throne speech?
Well, throne speeches historically, and I've been here for many of them, lay out the plan for the government in the coming year. That roadmap is then filled out by a budget that will be tabled in 2 weeks' time, that will lay out where we plan to put public monies to meet the needs and challenges of the 2022. And I would also highlight that there were a number of initiatives that were announced today, the creation of a new ministry to address lands, water, and natural resource stewardship, a standalone forestry ministry. These are administrative organizational ideas, but they will have a profound impact on our economy, on our rural communities particularly, but right across the board. Doing a better job of rationalizing and streamlining processes is good for business, good for workers, good for communities, and good for the environment. It was a massive job over the past 12 months for the professional public service to look at how they could reorganize themselves on the land base to ensure that we're getting best outcomes for people, for the land, and for communities. And so I'm very happy to see that work coming to a conclusion and the beginning of the work ahead for that ministry. We also talked about the economic plan that Minister Callan will be tabling next week, and talked about the challenges that we face on continuing to have the strongest economy in the country. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens by having investor confidence. It happens by having a skilled workforce. And it happens by making sure that government can be responsive to new ideas as they come forward. You heard in the throne speech discussions about agriculture and agri-tech. That will transform our supply chains and make sure that we can do our level best in the years ahead to feed ourselves, taking advantage of the agricultural land reserve and the far-sighted vision of those who came before us to protect that land, not for development, but for the creation of food. And we need to find new and innovative ways to create more food for the people in British Columbia and other markets. I'm reminded of how little Netherlands produces not just food for themselves, not just flowers for the world, but an extraordinary amount of food for their neighbors on a small footprint. Here in British Columbia, we have, it became abundantly clear through the floods in the Fraser Valley and Sumas Prairie particularly, that our agriculture sector is strong, it's resilient, but it needs to be there for the long term. I'm grateful that we were able to put almost $250 million into the agricultural recovery programs coming from the floods, and there's much more to come in terms of our infrastructure, protecting those communities going forward, working with our federal partners. And that's just a bit of it. I think if you go back and read the speech, you'll find that there's a whole bunch of information in there about how we're going to work together to build a stronger, better British Columbia.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Sure. Can I also ask you about COVID restrictions? Saskatchewan today announcing that they're getting rid of their mandatory vaccination card system as of Monday and ending indoor masks as of the end of the month. Alberta has a plan they're announcing in an hour or so. Where is BC on moving up the end of these restrictions? What would you say to people who are looking at the other provinces and hoping that we're going to move that quickly as well?
Well, I would suggest that we're going to follow the same path that we have been on since the pandemic began, and that is to take advice and counsel from public health officials who are working with our acute care system and working with others in the community to make sure that we're continuing to protect people. And restrictions, direction and advice on restrictions will come from the Public Health Office in the days ahead. She's made it clear that she has plans for Family Day, which is coming. I will say that where we have had success is ensuring that workplaces have plans in place to protect workers and to protect customers, and that should continue beyond the pandemic. I believe that masks are effective in protecting people, and I don't believe that an arbitrary decision by an elected official is the best way forward in that regard. And similarly, the immunization cards supported by the vast majority of people to ensure that the sacrifices that they've made have provided benefits for them and their families going forward. And we'll just see where Dr. Henry wants to go with all of this. She hasn't advised me on her plans yet. I have a vague idea based on hospitalizations being stable, cases coming down. And with respect to other jurisdictions, everybody's addressed this in a different way. And I'll put our record up against all of the other provinces in the country, and outcomes have been better in terms of mortalities, in terms of impacts on the economy. Clearly, our unemployment rate is 5.1%, leading the country, created more jobs than existed before the pandemic. I think there's a lot of positive to say about how we've got here, and it all is a result not of government policy. Specifically, it's about British Columbians recognizing and acknowledging that they have a role to play to protect themselves, their families, and their communities. And I don't believe that's going to change because of announcements in other provinces.
Next question is from Binder Sargent, CTV.
Hi, Premier. Just following up on what Rob asked there. Just wondering, you said you have a vague idea. Could it be, you think, weeks or months? And do you think that those other jurisdictions are bowing to perhaps political pressure? Because we have heard some politicians there supporting the convoy in Ottawa. You've had a protest there outside the legislature today. So just if you have a bit of a sense on sort of what that timeline could look like.
Well, again, Dr. Henry has made it clear in her briefings that she will have more to say next week, so I'll leave it to her to bring that forward. I wasn't trying to be obtuse there with the question that came from Rob. I understand the work that the public health officials are doing with Minister Dix and others to ensure that we're in sync with the public and the virus, not in sync with a handful of protesters. And having said that, I do absolutely recognize the right of people to dissent, to public policy. I come from a party of dissent. I couldn't count the number of protests I've been to in my life, starting in grade 7 and going up until recently. But that does not, I don't recall at any time ever trying to deny rights of other citizens. I don't recall at any time participating in anything that involved threats and intimidation to other citizens. And I would hope, it's not just the Convoy movement or any other movement that seeks to put themselves ahead of the rest of British Columbians. That's just not on in a democracy. We certainly welcome those who want to exercise their right to dissent, but we do not, and I don't believe the vast majority of British Columbians support intruding into the lives of other people who are trying to get on with a very challenging time. So I'm hopeful that people will continue to express their discontent in a way that does not interfere with the lives of other people.
Do you have a follow-up, Binder?
I do, and I'd like to ask you about FIFA. A question from a colleague. Do you think Vancouver stands a chance, and can you give us an update on sort of where those discussions may be at?
Well, certainly, I'm happy to do that. We have been approached by Soccer Canada and officials by way of Soccer Canada to FIFA to revisit the question of whether Vancouver could be a host city for the 2026 World Cup. When we made a decision in 2018, we had just formed a government. It was a minority government. We had a list of priorities that we wanted to address, and the FIFA request in 2018 for something 8 years down the road did not seem urgent and pressing to me personally. And I felt that based on our analysis of the requests from FIFA, that it was too rich to have a blank check without us having a full understanding of the challenges that we faced in a number of other areas. It's 2022. We have a strong majority government. We have a need to attract people back to British Columbia for our tourism industry, for our hospitality sector, and the prospect of events, whether it be FIFA, whether it be the Invictus Games, which is very much in play as well for British Columbia in the years ahead, and the Indigenous-led movement to see the 2030 Olympic bid come back to Vancouver Whistler are all things that we're happy to entertain, provided we have a full understanding of what the cost will be, and we can transparently make that clear to the people who will end up having to pay for much of it, the citizens of British Columbia. Having said that, obviously the success of the Canadian soccer team preparing for Qatar in 2022 is exciting for soccer fans, and Vancouver, British Columbia is filled with soccer fans, and I know that the connections between Vancouver, Seattle, and down the West Coast is appealing to FIFA. So we're in discussion to see what we can do about finding an agreement that meets our needs and meets the needs of FIFA and does not upset arrangements with other cities across North America. But it's something that I believe we would be remiss if we didn't engage with representatives of Soccer Canada to see where there was space for us to find something successful for our tourism sector and for hospitality. We have in BC Place a very expensive stadium that had a rebuild that was almost as expensive as the first construction, and it's been virtually idle for the past 2 years. I don't think that's a cost-effective way to manage public resources. So if there's a way that we can see that facility used more, whether it be more concerts, more sporting events, more other convention-style activity, we want to see that happen. And so Melanie Mark, the Minister responsible, has been working across the board to find ways to attract more people to British Columbia when it's safe to do so that we can restart those key parts of our economy.
Next question is from Richard Zussman, Global News.
Premier, one of the mentions in the throne speech is about how the end days of this pandemic will be in months and not years. I think we all anticipate that. How crucial is getting people back to work as part of driving the economy again? Getting people back on transit, getting people back using downtown restaurants and coffee shops. And what will the government do to help push that back? Will there be an encouragement at some point to get people back in their traditional workplaces?
Well, certainly that's the objective, not just for the government, but for businesses, for workers, for families. People want to put COVID behind them. I get that. I'm at the front of that line with Dr. Henry and Minister Dix. But we want to make sure that we don't do it in a reckless and cavalier manner just because people are honking horns, a small minority honking horns. We want to make sure that the sacrifices that businesses and workers and communities have made over the past 2 years are not just thrown away because of some noise out on the legislative lawn or in the capital city of Canada. Having said that, I absolutely understand that people are done with this. I live in a community. I have neighbors. I talk to people all the time, and we want to move on. They want to move on. We all want to move on. But we have been successful by following the guidelines and the hard work of public health officials led by Dr. Henry and her team, and making sure that we're supporting the acute care system that's so fundamental to the delivery of emergency services to British Columbians. And as hospitalizations start to decline, we're in a better position to take actions on restrictions that are in place and be more encouraging of people to get back in the game, get out there. And I was delighted to see stakeholders in the education sector agree to renew tournaments for young people. I remember as a high school student how important that was to my development, not just with respect to physical fitness, but socialization, the notion of teamwork, working together, collective purpose, common goal. These are fundamental issues that are part and parcel of our K-12 system that have suffered because of COVID, and I'm grateful that that's starting to come back. And it's examples like that, I think, that people want to see, and they hold that up as some symbol of hope that we're getting to the end of this.
Follow-up, Richard?
How crucial are lifting these capacity limits to help reinvigorate the economy, and how crucial are moving beyond restrictions to drive the economic plan and the budget that will come out of this throne speech?
Well, it's critically important. Minister Callon will have much to say next week, and of course Minister Robinson even more the week after. We are looking again at one of the hottest economies in the country, but one of the biggest challenges, and that was highlighted by the labor force data last week, 1 million jobs will go wanting in the next 10 years if we don't start a human resource strategy to meet those vacancies. And you've been covering, you and others in this room and across the press gallery and media have been covering the challenges that employers are facing trying to find people to fill vacancies. And in areas where there is uncertainty, like hospitality, it's harder to encourage people to wait for their job to come back when other opportunities are presenting themselves because of a hot labor market. So working people have more options today than they did 5 years ago, and that's putting a strain on existing industries, and they're looking not just to government but to the marketplace to find ways to meet their needs, and we need people back and moving around and spending their discretionary money on a night out, gifts, retail activity that's not internet-based, I would suggest. And if anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Next question's from Lisa Eusda, City News.
Premier, you have throughout this let health take the lead, but we are seeing other premiers go more in front of, the next steps in the pandemic. And I'm wondering when we will see that with you, and are you feeling pressure when you're seeing other provinces and other premiers, for lack of a better term, taking the lead with this?
Not at all, because I talk to the premiers and I know the grief that brings with it. So, and I don't want to leave the impression that I'm passing the buck to Dr. Henry, but she is far more equipped and able to understand the data and translate that for the public than I am. And I said to my colleagues 2 years ago that if they felt that being the intermediary between the experts and the public, they were wrong, and I continue to think that's the wrong approach. Having said that, as you'll know, I have been continuing to work not just on the pandemic issues, but working to try and get a renewed interest from the federal government in the Canada Health Transfer, which sounds like an administrative or accounting practice, but in fact it's about the resources we need to hire the people to provide the services that will reduce wait times, that will get better outcomes for cancer care, for a host of other things. So those are the areas where I believe I can be most valuable, to use my experience and my persuasive abilities to move issues along. I have had from the beginning an approach to cabinet government that I have very capable people around me that have more than enough experience and ability to do their work without me meddling in it. And it's just the approach that I've had from the beginning, and I don't see any reason to change that now. I have confidence in the people that are making these decisions. I have discussions, I disagree, and then we talk things through. And that's, I believe, a better way for me to use my abilities to meet the needs and expectations of British Columbians than to be standing here, quite frankly, every day, trying to interpret the issues that Dr. Henry and Minister Dix know way better than I do. So why would I get in the way of that? As we move into reopening, as that happens, I'll be standing with the Minister of Finance, I'll be standing with the Minister of Economic Recovery and other ministers to work through these things. But it's my view, and I don't see any reason to change it, that I have capable people. British Columbians can have confidence in them, and I'll do my best to support them whenever I can.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
And just regarding the months comment that's in the throne speech, that, taking care of people's health in the months ahead, coming out of the pandemic, is that an actual or an aspirational look at what's coming ahead? And when you're talking about, how your neighbors and so many people, well, hell, all of us are just sick of the pandemic, I'm wondering how, when the winter comes again, and Dr. Henry's talked about that it's going to be, essentially another brick in the head, how would you claw back and put in any restrictions again, when people are in this place of being absolutely fed up?
Well, again, that's up to the data. That's up to the information. And we're not going to stop monitoring and tracking this information when we reduce the number of times we have press availabilities. We're going to continue to do the work. And as the evidence presents itself, we'll lay it out for British Columbians and we'll have that discussion. But I don't want anyone to interpret the word "in the months ahead" as meaning we're months away. That's a statement that we have work to do. And it's not unlike our response to flood recovery, the extraordinary challenges in Lytton. We have a ton of work from last year that we need to keep working on, and we don't know what the future holds, but we need to be prepared for any eventuality, and that's why we're working on a whole bunch of fronts. So when I say the months ahead, we're going to continue to have health challenges. We're going to continue to have environmental challenges. There are going to be challenges for our economy if we don't find a way to bring more skilled people and even unskilled people to play in our economy. 5.1% unemployment at a time when other jurisdictions are seeing an increase in unemployment. This is more people came to British Columbia in the first 3 quarters of last year than have done so since 1972. That's international immigration as well as in-migration. So people are coming to British Columbia, and we need as a government to make sure that the services they need are there and that they can contribute to the economy and be their best selves as they put down roots here.
Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you, Premier. In reading the throne speech, I'm looking at the big issues it points to on the topic of health. You're looking for more federal government assistance there. On the opioid crisis, you're waiting for federal approvals. On decriminalization and safe supply. On housing, you're waiting till the fall to introduce legislation, and same with emergency management to deal with crises. What do you say to people who might look at this and think the document doesn't seem to lack urgency on the big issues?
Well, I'd have to disagree. Big issues require big solutions that require consultation, require fastidious work by content experts inside government and outside government, discussing how we manage emergencies. We've had a couple of classes in managing emergencies over the past number of years, and we've learned from that. And now we need to make sure that we can implement what we've learned in legislation. We said last fall that the Emergency Act would be amended next fall, which is coming up, and so we're right on track for that. There are a range of issues you mentioned with respect to the opioid crisis that need partnerships with the federal government. The criminal code is a federal responsibility. Making sure that we can implement our groundbreaking safe supply initiatives in a way that's coherent and meets the needs of communities as well as the line that would be drawn by a federal government requires collaboration. And I know that it's usually, and I, as a student of history and someone who's been around here for a long, long time, it's usually a safe bet that provinces will bash the federal government. And I don't see any percentage in that. I see collaborating with the federal government where we need to. We are a federation, a decentralized federation that depends on orders of government doing the right thing. And when it comes to the Canada Health Transfer, that's long overdue. And to have the support of all of the other premiers over the past number of years to work collaboratively to find a way to reimagine public health care is really important. Bringing the federal government along when it comes to the opioid crisis is really important. So I don't believe it's an abdication and a blame thing. It's about just reminding them that we have joint responsibility on some of these issues, and we're going to get better outcomes if we collaborate, which is, again, part and parcel, I believe, of the message of the throne speech, collaborating with the opposition. You'll remember the first few years of our government was a collaboration with the Green Party and some collaboration with the official opposition. There's a new leader of the official opposition. There'll be a couple of bricks coming my way, and I'm fine with that too. But at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, to improve outcomes for people, and that requires more humility and less hubris. So I'm going to let experts and people who are efficiently bringing information to the public do their job, and I'll back them up when I'm needed.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes. So are you saying then that these are aspirational notions for you and not really promises to British Columbians that these things can be accomplished in this legislative sitting?
Well, this is the second aspirational question, and every day is an aspirational day for me, trying to make it better than it was the day before. So I'll concede that, but that's not a concession to no success or no progress. It means that in order for us to get to where we want to go, in order for us to get to the end of the road, we're going to need to do it with partners and allies and accomplices, and that includes communities, Indigenous peoples, young people, workers, investors, other orders of government. And so we need to address the healthcare crisis, which is, having seen it firsthand over the past number of months, incredibly compassionate and professional people that are just being strained beyond the breaking point. They need to know that there's help on the way. My job is to make sure that the federal government fully understands that they can't continue to talk about a national healthcare strategy if 80% of it's being paid by individual provinces, some with greater capacity than others. We need a national plan. I'm confident that we'll get there. The Prime Minister has been very forthcoming in our conversations as recently as near Christmas. But of course, when he was here to assist putting together a national solution to the atmospheric river and the impacts in the Fraser Valley and in Merritt and through the Coquihalla, it was an opportunity for us to, again, hammer home this fact that all Canadians need a vibrant British Columbia. All British Columbians need a vibrant Canada. I suppose that's aspirational, but we need to be working on it every day with a view to outcomes. And our outcomes are making sure that we reestablish our highway system, making sure that our ports are working and functioning for all Canadians, and making sure that we can reduce wait times, hire more people, get more doctors and nurses, make sure we're caring for our elders in a humane and thoughtful and compassionate way. All of that is on the agenda of the federal government. The trick now will be to get the resources to deliver that in the hands of the people who do it, and that's provinces.
Okay, we will come back to the room for questions. Andrew McLeod, Tyee.
Hello, Premier. Good to see you. In the speech, it referred to healthcare funding, the healthcare funding model as being unsustainable. You're talking today about the stress the system's under. You used similar language last week. It's the kind of language that often gets used by people who want more private sector involvement in the system, who will propose, two-tier solutions, that kind of thing. Are you worried at all about undermining the system by using language like that?
No, not at all. The system's undermined, Andrew, right now. It doesn't have sufficient resources to meet the expectations of the public. And those expectations are real. It's about knee and hip replacements. It's about diagnostics. It's about treatment for cancer. It's about a whole host of things that are being rationed because we don't have the resources. It's not about delivery of public or private. Every comment I've made, I'm confident that I've suggested that it's our public healthcare system that separates us from our other partners here in North America. And that is a right of citizenship, but we can't take it for granted. And the federal government has been taking it for granted to this point in time. 8-9% increases in costs cannot be sustained. You've seen many budgets here. The health budget is growing at a rate that we can't support just with tax revenues and other revenues here in British Columbia. The money that Ottawa would send, much of it was generated here. It's not, Ottawa doesn't have a special place that it gets resources. It gets it from Canadians, including British Columbians. And we have been willing partners in redistributing the wealth of British Columbia to other places, and one of those places being the federal government. And it's now their time, with their ability to manage resources far greater than individual provinces. And as I said, all provinces and territories have different abilities to meet their growing needs. But the challenges are the same from coast to coast to coast. So I'm not here to engage, nor will I engage in the months ahead, in a discussion about a debate between public and private. I am a creature of the public system. It was created when I was a kid. It has served me personally, my family, my neighbors, and all British Columbians and Canadians very well. So I'm not abandoning that. Quite the contrary. I want to reimagine it for the years ahead. And I have 12 other allies and premiers' offices across the country. And I believe we have a federal government that's coming around to the need to make those serious investments so that we can keep public health care on track.
Follow-up, Andrew?
Yeah, this is a slightly different topic, but similar theme in sort of whose responsibilities things are. There was a fair bit in the speech about housing. This morning, the NDP MP for Victoria had a press release out complaining that the price of housing in Victoria had doubled since 2015. I mean, you've been in power here for much of that. You have a 30-point housing plan. Why is that particular issue so hard to get on top of or to solve?
Why is housing costs? Well, we live on an island. You can't just go into the next farmer's field as they do in Mississauga or Brampton or Regina. You run into water really quickly. So land is at a premium. You've got mountains in the lower mainland. You've got challenges for supply. That's part of it. We had to wrestle speculation to the ground. We've done that, I think, effectively. The Minister of Finance will have more initiatives coming forward with respect to trying to reduce costs. But ultimately, we need to build more housing, and we've been building it in record levels. Case in point would be student housing. Oftentimes, people say, well, student housing doesn't affect me. I'm not a student. But that takes students, out of the marketplace and into the campus, which frees up housing that they would have lived in otherwise. I think we just at Thompson Rivers University alone, we've built more student housing than the former government built in 16 years. So we're focusing on 30 points, trying to find a way to touch all of the buttons that will lead to more supply, reduce costs, and making sure that people can afford to live in British Columbia. And as we see more people coming here, that will become a bigger challenge, not a smaller one. But certainly I welcome any assistance that we can get from federal members of parliament of all parties. And these are challenging issues, but we've made a pretty significant breakthrough in what the escalation of costs were from 2012 to 2016. It's still going up at an unacceptable level, but it'll take consistent work by Minister Eby on the supply side, Minister Robinson on the management side, and again, finding ways to get the federal government back in the housing business, which used to be their responsibility.
I'm just going to ask that if you're in the room asking a question, you have to speak up a little so everybody on the phone line can hear. Shannon Waters, BC Today.
Hello, Premier. Nice to see you back behind the podium. I wanted to ask about the continuing overdose crisis in BC. We don't have the numbers for the last 2 months of the year yet, those numbers that are people who died, and it's already the worst year on record. What do you think your government needs to do differently to be able to turn the tide on this crisis?
Well, as you know, Shannon, you've been covering this for a long time. It's a multifaceted problem, starting with gangs and those who would prey on vulnerable people for money rather than help. We need to work with communities on things like safe supply. The harm reduction strategies that have been in place starting in Vancouver at the turn of the century have been proven to be very effective, not just here, but in other jurisdictions. It's still resisted in some communities, but not so much here in British Columbia. Making sure there's safe supply is not as easy as snapping your fingers. We've certainly discovered that since 2017, but we'll continue to work on that with communities, with stakeholders. But I understand that the coroner will be issuing a report later this week that will be highlighting the devastating impact of the second public health crisis here in British Columbia, the toxic drug supply and its consequences for people and families. I haven't seen the report. I expect to be briefed on it in the next number of days. But we have a Minister of Mental Health and Addictions who's working tirelessly to find ways to collaborate with care providers in communities and others on the front lines to make sure that we're doing everything we can to improve outcomes for people who have addictions and challenges with the toxic drug supply. But if it were simple, we would have solved it. We continue to do our best, and as you know, the pandemic has not been our friend in this regard because people are being encouraged to isolate at a time when they need to be surrounded by those who can care for them. And so that's a big problem, and we're aware of that. Dr. Henry, of course, was working tirelessly on the opioid crisis before COVID came along, and the public health officials are continuing to do both. And they could use a bit of a break as well, but there's no break in sight on the opioid side other than continuing to work with partners in the communities, working with the federal government on things like decriminalization and safe supply. But those are just some of the tools that we need to have to meet the challenges. And families are constantly calling out to us to do more, and we do our best. Destigmatizing addictions is a key part of that, and I'm quite proud of how the community, not government, but how the community has responded to destigmatizing mental health issues and addictions. And that's all to the good. A better understanding of the challenges helps us bring more allies to the table for types of tools that we'll need to finally defeat this. But when we can be together more regularly, where we can have people with friends and loved ones to manage any of the challenges that they may have, we'll get better outcomes.
Follow-up, Shannon?
Yes, the throne speech mentions that the province will continue to press for federal leadership when it comes to decriminalization. And the minister's submission to Health Canada went in I believe it was early November. But her mandate letter from 2020 says, in the absence of prompt federal action, she is tasked with working with the Public Safety Minister and Attorney General to develop a Made in BC solution that will help save lives. So are you moving away from that Made in BC solution? And if not, do you have a timeline for the province going its own way on that issue?
Well, we have, from 2017, the Solicitor General made it clear that we did not want to see prosecutions from law enforcement going to prosecutors with respect to simple possession. So that was a Made in BC solution. What we want to see from the federal government is relaxing or changing the criminal code, which is their responsibility, which will give more comfort to law enforcement that they're not just following a guideline, but following the law. So I was moved by the superintendent in Vancouver coming forward and saying, you know, this is where we need to go, the chief of police, and then chief of police right across the country. And I expected faster action, quite frankly, from the federal government, but these are not easy issues, and they always have a season. We brought forward a formal request last fall, but that was after collaborating with City of Vancouver and others to make sure that the federal government understood that this isn't a Vancouver issue, it's a British Columbia issue. And they were working with the view that this was only a downtown east side issue, and we all know that that's not the case. So first of all, having an understanding in Ottawa, and I believe that that's now well and truly there, that we need a British Columbia focus, and I would suggest a national focus on these issues, and I'm hopeful that will come.
Last question today is from Mira Baines, CBC.
Hi, Prue. A lot of businesses, including wedding vendors, are still facing restrictions because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they say that it's very difficult for them to access funding. Is there any efforts underway to sort of streamline the process a bit for them?
Well, certainly Minister Callon has been working on trying to make sure that our proposals to assist businesses affected by COVID is flexible enough to meet challenges just like this. As luck would have it, my son is getting married this coming summer. He planned to get married last summer. And so I know firsthand the challenges that providers have, and not just wedding planners, but all that goes with that in trying to predict where we're going to be. I'm hopeful that that becomes clearer as the summer gets closer, the wedding season, if we stick on this sector. But I know that Minister Callon has been receptive to suggestions and proposals from industry, and we've tried to develop our policies and programs to meet their needs, not as a blanket approach, but as a sector-specific approach. And one example of that would be Legions, who are in the business of providing meals, but they're not characterized as restaurants. They're characterized as service clubs that happen to serve food. And so the restrictions on gathering and people coming to eat in communal settings had a big impact on them. So we changed our policy to make sure that Legions were not left behind. Similarly, gyms were working very closely with us, and there's still more work to do there. On the wedding side, I believe that we have been working to find ways to ensure that they're going to need human resources, they're going to need people. And if you don't know where your industry is going to go, it's hard to recruit and retain employees. So these are all issues that we're grappling with, and I know Minister Callon seized of it.
Do you have a follow-up, Mira?
And Mr. Falcon appears eager to get back into the legislature as an MLA. Any idea when a by-election could be called?
Well, I was happy to see Andrew Wilkinson in the legislature today. I was led to believe that he resigned yesterday, so I'm not calling a by-election today. But I certainly welcome Member Falcon, or Citizen Falcon, to the leadership of the BC Liberal Party. I know that he's wanted to do that for a long time, and I welcome him to the fray. But we'll focus on many of the things that are before us, and one of those will be to fill a vacancy, but there isn't one today, which surprised me. I was happy to see Minister Wilkinson, or Member Wilkinson. I hadn't an opportunity to thank him for his service. I get to do that before he leaves.
That's all the time we have. Thanks for joining
Great.
us.
Thanks, everybody. Well, he was sitting in the legislature today, so I assume that that's not the case. Good to see you all.